Hi everybody, and welcome back to Sew Along with Jan and part 4 of the October Kimberbell Mini Quilt. So we're going to put together our little mini quilt in this video. Got all 9 of our little blocks done, so here's all the little blocks. And then we're going to need our backing for this. So the backing is 14 inches by 14 inches. And then I like to put shape flex on the back of it. Because it helps a lot with when I go to do the stitching in the ditch. It keeps it from puckering on the back. I like the looks of it better. It's much flatter. So I always put shape flex on the back of my backing. So I've got that. And then I'm also putting a sleeve on the back to hang in my little hanger. So my sleeve is cut 12 inches long by 6 inches wide. And then what I do, and I left this unstitched, and I'll stitch it in a little bit. On one side, I mark in 1/2 inch on each side, and then I take my ruler and my rotary cutter and I put it on the 1/2 inch mark and then down on the corner so that this side is still 12 inches, but the top side is only 11 inches now. And then you turn in 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch as a hem. And then when we make this little sleeve, we're going to actually then fold it over like this, and I'll press it down. And then the part that's skinnier will be on the underneath side of the sleeve. Okay, so that's our little sleeve, and I'm gonna hem these little hems here. Oh, and I forgot we need to have one more thing for this. We need some Heat and Bond Ultra. It's right behind me here. Heat and Bond Ultra. We're going to get a little piece about 11 inches long by about 3/4 of an inch wide to attach once we fold this over and press it here, we'll attach it with that piece of Heat and Bond Ultra to the back of the quilt to hold it down. And the rest of it, the top part, will be sewn into where the binding goes on. Okay, so that's our sleeve. And then we also need the binding. Now my binding is going to be this yellow, and the binding is actually, I do make mine a little narrower. I make it at 2 1/4 inches instead of 2 1/2. I like a little tighter binding, so mine is cut at 2 1/2, and you can see that I've sewn them together and I've folded it in half and pressed it. So there's my binding. Okay. So we're going to start out. I've just got some neutral thread in my machine. I think I've just got some kind of off-white cream color. And we're going to sew together our little blocks here. So we got 9 little blocks to do. And they give us a picture here to show us how to do this. So we're going to go ahead. This is row 1. So we're going to do this one, and the little pumpkin one. So these 3 are going to go together first. So we're going to do these 2 first, and we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam. Now I am going to go over here and go to my quilting tab on my Luminaire, and I'm going to use Q02. Most of the Brother Baby Lock machines have a Q02 on the tab if you have a touch screen, and that is the 1/4 inch piecing stitch. And what it does is it moves the needle to the 5.5 millimeter position. So my needle has moved over, and then I'm just going to run my fabric right along the right hand edge of the foot here. All right, so I might need a pin. Let's see. So I think I'm going to try to get these lined up. We're going to do our 1/4 inch seam between the first 2. So we're going to do all 3 rows, and then we're going to press, and then we'll do the rows together. Now these, you do want to press the seams open. They're kind of stiff, so I like to press them open, and so I don't have such bulky seams. Okay, so we're going to do our 1/4 inch seam. I'm running it right along the edge of the foot. And we're going to do the other one. We'll do all 3 rows. So this is the first row. Oops, I think I need to back up just a little bit so I can tie off. I like to try to tie off if I can. Okay. And then we're going to, You know, I might need to put some black on this one with this black. I'm not sure if that light will show. We'll try it. I can tell when I go to open it up, I might have to restitch these. I'm not sure. Sometimes it shows in the seam, so let me see if it's going to show or not. All right. Do our 1/4 inch seam. Thought about using black thread, but I thought it would show too much in the light colors. There's more light colors than dark colors in this. So we're going to stitch this one. Okay. All right. So let's see. I think it might be okay. So there's that row. That's the first row. So let's see. We're going to look at the second row here. The second row is the little hat. So we get the little hat. Our sweet and spooky treats are the first two, and then the one with the little bats on it. So we'll do these two. So we'll just kind of look at the book. The book helps you get it all lined up correctly. So it kind of makes like a little 9-patch block. I can get this lined up here. Again, I'm still going to use my 1/4 inch seam. I like to tie off just because these are kind of thick, and when you go to press them open, I like to tie it off. And we're going to tie off down here. Okay. And then we're going to do the one with the little bats. So this one, and then the one with the bats. It's on this side. Because they kind of mixed all the little colors up, you know, the colors of the blocks up. All right, get this one. And I'm just, like I said, I'm using a Pima cotton thread that's just kind of a neutral color. Whatever works for you. Oops, let me grab that pin out of there. Tie this one off. And that's all of them for this row. And then the last row is the little ghost cupcakes. There's those. That looks good. Okay, so there's that one. And then the last row is going to be this one first, and then the one with the little candy corn in it. We'll do those two first. These have been so fun. I've really enjoyed doing these this year. I'm glad I decided to do them. It's been fun to have something to hang in my little hanger. So they have been a lot of fun. Lots of different techniques in them. So I have to say the April one was a little bit of a challenge with all that reverse applique. This one was fun though. I liked this one. Okay, we're going to tie this off at the end. Cut. And then that's the third row, and then the last one is going to be the one with the white bottom. Okay. This one in here. Okay. Do a 1/4 inch seam, and I just love the little confetti. It's so cute. They're all the little, they just did a lot of cute little details on all these, and they're small, such small blocks. It's amazing how much they got into them, you know, detail wise. Okay, I'll tie off down here. Okay, so there's our 3 rows sewn together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and I'm going to press open my seams on the back. So I'm going to press these open so that they're nice and flat, because it'll make it easier to get it sewn together. And then I'll come back and we'll sew our rows together. Okay, so we got our 3 rows together, and I've opened my seams up nice and flat. And then we're going to put these together. So the first row is this one, and then this one goes right there. So these 2 rows go together like this. So we're going to put these right sides together. Now you do want to make sure that you get your little, get your little seams all all lined up here. And I like to put a pin on either side of the seam allowance just so that things don't scoot on me when I go to sew these together. So we'll put a pin on each side. Maybe. I can't get it in there straight. There we go. Get this one. That. Maybe. There we go. And then we'll stitch these together, and then we'll do the last row. And then I'll press those open. So I think this is going to be really cute. All right, let's put a pin down here. Everything stays lined up for me. All right. Ouch. Just stabbed myself. Okay, so now we're going to do these two rows. Again, still using my Q02 piecing stitch. Get everything lined up here. Okay, I'm going to pull these partially out. Make sure I've got everything lined up in the center there. And then this one, it's going to be so cute. Most of these little mini quilts have gone together pretty quickly. There was a couple of them that had some fairly intense blocks in them. These have been so much fun. Okay, so I'll get those. And then, whoops, get the last one here. Look, I dropped a pin on the floor. Two piece. We got this row. We'll sew the other row on, and then I'll do all the pressing at the same time. All right, so there's the first two rows. Let's see how I did on the little seams here. You think I did okay? Sometimes I have a little trouble, but I think they look pretty good. I think those look pretty good. Sometimes I get them a little off, but I think I did okay. All right, so I got those. And then this one is the third row, so it's going to go down here. You know, I actually kind of like the pink. What do you think, guys? Does it look okay? What they should have done with these, I think, wouldn't it have been neat if they put some, like some of the little detail in there? See, a lot of them had the little details, but some of them didn't, so that might have been kind of cute. So this one goes, yeah, this one goes here, so we're going to flip this over this way. Get our little joints lined up here. Put a couple pins in there. This is always so hard to get these lined up just right. It's like my old days of sewing clothing. You had to get the seams all lined up nicely so that they laid nice and flat. All right, let's see here. Get this one. And the Hobbs batting doesn't make it real stiff, so it's not real stiff, which is good. Makes it easier to sew on. Some battings are very hard, so they are harder. I think they're harder to especially do small things with. The Hobbs is nice and soft. All right, so there's that. All right, so we'll do this row. Everything lined up. Maybe. There we go. Tie it off. And then I will press, and we'll be ready to put the backing on already. This goes along pretty quick. I really enjoy this video. Is my favorite one, is putting it together. Put the binding on. It's always so fun to see how it all ends up. It looks so different. They look so different when you know, when they're together than they do separately. So when you start sewing everything together, everything changes. So let's pull these partially out. Okay. That all lined up. So I think pink's going to be okay. I should have looked a little harder for lavender. I might have had some, but it looked pink to me. So I thought, well, after I got it all cut out and I started working on it, I'm like, maybe it was supposed to be lavender. All right, let's see what it looks like, and then I'm going to go press. See how I did here. I got everything right side up, so that's always a plus too, right? So here we go. Here's our little top. So the next step is going to be I'm going to press these open so that my seams are open. And then we're going to pin baste the backing on, getting ready to stitch in the ditch. Okay, so we've got our little top sewn together. I've got it all pressed out, so here's the back with all the seams nice and flat. And then what we're going to do is put this on, and I normally do this over on my sewing table, on my cutting table. So I'm just going to kind of show you how I'm going to get started. I'm going to go ahead and put the nice side of the fabric is down on the back. And then I'm going to just kind of try to space this as evenly as possible on the backing. And then I'm going to take my safety pins, and I like to pin base. So I'm just going to put a couple of pins in each block to hold it in place while I do the stitching in the ditch, which will be the next step. So just do a couple maybe in each block. Try to keep them away from the seams if you can, because then you won't have to move them when you go to do the stitching. So I'm going to just, see if I can get this one in. It's easier on my cutting table, so I'll go finish it over there, but I'll put a few pins in so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So we're going to do the pin basting first, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to do our stitching in the ditch. Now the stitch in the ditch is going to be done with monofilament. So I've got my Metler Transfill monofilament thread to do the stitching in the ditch. So I'll be right back. I'm going to go finish the pinning here, and then we'll come back and do all of the stitching in the ditch. Okay, so I'm all pin basted, ready to go here, and we're going to do some stitching in the ditch. I like to stitch in the ditch with my J-foot because it has a little notch in the center that helps me keep things straight. Now, if you prefer like a stitch in the ditch foot or a walking foot, use whichever works best for you. I'm going to use the J-foot. And we're going to kind of start in the center and work our way out. There's not really a center, so we're going to do like this line, and then we'll do this one, and then we'll flip it over and do the lines, okay? So there's not really any right or wrong way to do this. You kind of want to start on the inside and work your way out, sort of. So, all right, so the other thing I've done is I've moved my needle to the center needle position, and I'm going to raise the length up a little bit to about 3.0. just because it's a little short. You know, we're going through quite a bit of bulk. And I'm just going to start right here on the edge. I've got that little notch on my foot, and I'm going to put it right down on the seam. I'm going to tie off here. I've got my monofilament in my needle and in my bobbin. When you wind your bobbin with monofilament, don't wind it too full. Wind it slowly and wind it maybe a quarter of a bobbin or so at a time. Okay, so we're just going to drive right down this little seam here. Now I'm keeping that little notch right on my seam allowance. Slow down to get to over the little bump there. The monofilament works quite well for stitching the ditch. You don't really see it. If you do something very dark like all navy or something like that, or all really dark colors, they do make a smoke monofilament as well. That's a little bit darker colored, and then it doesn't show. Most of the time I use the clear. So this is a clear monofilament. Okay, so I'm going to go down here. We're going to tie off down here. All right, and making it about 3.0 for the length helps, because then it's not quite so, the stitches aren't quite so long. Okay, so let's take a look here. All right, and then we're going to go over to this side. And if you're careful when you put your pins in, you shouldn't have to move them too much. So get this side done. Tie off. Just a second, I got a thread in the way here. There we go. Put that little notch in the middle of my J-foot right on my seam. So if you find that it works better to use like a stitch in the ditch foot, or if it works better to use a walking foot, please do. These machines, the Brother and Baby Lock machines, actually feed very well. So I don't use a walking foot like I used to, because these have really good feed systems in them. There we go. So we're going to tie off. Okay, and then we can flip it over and do the other sides. That looks pretty good. Let's see what it looks like on the back. Now when I put that that shape flex on the back, see how I don't get the puckering on the, I used to get so much puckering on the back when I didn't do that, and I really like that it's flatter on the back. Okay, so now we're going to do this side. So I just turned it end for end, and we'll do the other sides. Okay, tie off here. Got that little notch right in my seam allowance. Through the middle there. Looks pretty good. Okay, make sure I don't hit this pin here. And we'll tie it off at the end. Right, one more side here. I think we got them all done. Then we'll go around the outside edge. So I always like to stitch around the outside edge at about 1/8 of an inch, just to hold everything down for me when I'm doing the trimming along the edge and stuff. And then it holds everything together when I'm doing the binding. All right, down the middle here. Looks pretty good. One of my seams was just a little off over here, but it's not too bad. Okay, just about to the end. We'll tie off. All right. So we have done it. So now you should have like a little checkerboard, little 9 patch on the back. So there's our stitching in the ditch, and then I'm going to go around the outside edge here. And on this foot, there's another notch. There's one in the middle, and then there's one kind of right at the edge of the zigzag opening. And if you put your fabric right on the edge on that notch, which is on the right-hand side, that'll give you a nice 1/8 inch roughly, with the needle in the center, kind of a top stitch. So that's the way I've always done top stitching, is just using that notch on that foot. It's about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to go all the way around the outside edge here. Okay, turn it around. Looks like I overshot it a little bit. It's okay. No one's going to see it. It's going to be under the binding. So I'm just running the edge of my fabric right along the edge of that notch on the right-hand side of my foot. Okay, so I'm going to watch that pin there. Try not to get too close to the edges either with the pins, so I don't have to move everything when I go to do this. Okay, turn it over. Oh, I did a little bit better on that one. Didn't overshoot it quite so far. And if you notice that when I stop, did you notice that my foot's going up and down? I'm using the pivot feature on this machine. I leave it on most of the time because I like the foot to come up and the needle to go down when I stop. So I'll show you where that little button is. It's very simple. A lot of the machines have that, and you can just turn it on. And once you turn it on many of the machines with the touch screens, it'll actually stay on until you turn it off again. All right, so we're just about around to the last side here. Okay, just tie off on the end here, and we're around the edge. So the next step will be to looks good. So see, I just drove around the outside edge, get everything stayed so it'll stay together. All right, so now I'm going to go take all the pins out, and then I'm going to trim with my rotary cutter and a ruler along the edges here and trim the backing right up to the edge so it's ready to do the binding. So we'll be ready to do binding here in a few minutes. Okay, so I'm all ready to put the binding on. I've got it all trimmed. And the first thing we need to do then is to put on our little sleeve on the back. So I've got my sleeve folded in half. I hemmed the ends and I've got it folded in half. The side that was shorter is on the inside, and then this is my piece of Heat and Bond Ultra. So I'm not going to iron that to the back of the quilt until I'm done stitching the binding on. So we're going to turn this over, and I found the center of my quilt top, and I've got the center of my little sleeve, and I'm going to line those up. We're just going to put the raw edges together here. And again, the skinnier end is underneath, and I'm going to go ahead and just pin this on so that it'll be up in the seam of the binding on the back here. That way we can hang it in the little hanger, or if you want to hang it on the little hanger, or if you want to hang it, I'm using the little metal hanger. The little hangers that go on the wall are really cute. I've got those all up on the website, so I'll link all of that in the videos. So if you want one of those. And I've also changed back to my neutral colored thread. So I've got that already. I think I'm going to stick a couple little pins down here so this won't flip up on me on the bottom of my, let's put a couple pins down here so it won't flip up while we're working with this. Now, depending on how you like to do your binding, I like to do my binding with the sewing machine, and that's how I'm going to show you. So then I am going to put my binding on the back of the little quilt. If you're going to hand stitch your binding down, you would be putting your binding on the front of the quilt. So we're going to be looking at the back here. I like to start at the bottom. I've already prepared my binding, so here's my binding. My binding is 2 1/4 inch binding instead of 2 1/2. So depending on what you like better, I prefer the narrower binding. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get this started. I like to leave about 8-inch tail or so. So we're going to kind of go over here. I've gone back to Q02, which is my 1/4 inch piecing stitch. I'm going to go on the bottom, start over here, and then we'll tie off here, and we're just going to put our binding on. Now I have a really nice document up on that I'll link on this video too. It's called Bind Aid, and I had to learn how to do binding many years ago, and a friend of mine gave me this little document, and it's so nice. Just gave me all the little basics that I needed. So I'm going to stop here 1/4 inch from the edge. Okay, so I just stitched a little ways. I'm going to cut, but this is all shown in Bind Aid, and that really taught me how to do binding. I struggled with binding and I couldn't figure it out, and when I got that, it really helped me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this corner. I'm going to go up at a 45-degree angle with my binding, get it where I want it, and then I'm going to bring down and I'm going to match up straight down. I'm going to match up the raw edges like that. Okay, and then we're going to sew with our 1/4 inch seam up this side. Okay, so we're going to do this all the way around. We'll speed up the sewing machine a little bit here, huh? So we're going to stop a 1/4 inch from the seam up here, okay? So or I should say 1/4 inch from the end. So I kind of eyeball it now. If you're unsure, you can measure, and put a pin there if you'd like, but I kind of eyeball it now. I've done a lot of binding, so kind of do the eyeball method. All right, so we're going to turn this. So here's our another side. We're going to turn this at a 45-degree angle, turn it up at a 45-degree angle, line up my corner right here. Whoops, here, didn't quite. Of course, I always have the seam in the middle. I always get a seam in my corner. I don't know how I end up doing that, but I always do it. Okay, and we're going to bring this straight down, and line up the raw edges and sew down this side. Now we're going to be sewing also over our little sleeve here. Okay, so we're going to be a little heavier with the little sleeve in there. Let me grab these pins as I'm going here. So we're going to go over that sleeve, hold it in there nice and beautiful, and the Heat and Bond Ultra works really well for the bottom. Sometimes when I've done these kind of things with the sleeves, you can hand stitch the bottom of the sleeve. I've even had some that they were like in a seam allowance, like you stitched in the ditch kind of on them. But this didn't have a seam there so that I could do that. So I just decided, and I don't really like to hand stitch. I'm not very good at it, so I don't like to hand stitch very well. So I thought we'll just use the Heat and Bond because the Heat and Bond does a good job. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop about 1/4 inch from the edge, tie off. Okay, and cut. And we'll go around this corner. So that looks really nice. There's our little sleeve there, all ready to be hung up. Looks like I've got a bunch of threads. Oops, here. I always have to get this camera just in the right spot so I don't hit it with my elbow. All right, so then we're going to go around this corner, match up my corner and get my 45-degree angle. And then I'm going to bring the raw edges straight down, line them up. Looks pretty good. Second, I need to pull my thread under my foot. If you keep your threads under your foot when you start and drop your needle, you're less likely to unthread your machine. Another one of my grandma's tricks, because she had a treadle machine that if you did not drop the needle and put the thread under the foot, it would unthread every time. So she was pretty adamant about that. So I do it kind of by habit now. I've just done it so long. Okay, so let's get this. We're going to go down and stop about 1/4 inch again. And I hope it's okay that I do the binding videos with these, because that way you see it each time, and it, it's you don't have to go try to find one binding video. All right, so we'll cut that off. We're going to go around the corner. So now we're getting about ready to get around the corner where we started here, okay? So we want to stop. We want to leave a little break, a little gap. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one lined up. Come down this way. Okay, get it all lined up. And we want to leave a little gap. So I'm not going to sew over this corner too far. Give us a little room to work with. This is a little stiff, so it's easier to have a little bit larger gap there to work with the binding. Okay, so I think we'll stop about right here. Just cut it off, or tie it off and then cut. Okay. Just a second here. I'm going to get these pins out of my way. I'll need a few in a minute, but then I'm going to get a marking pen and my hem gauge. Hopefully I'll be able to find it. It always ends up at the bottom. There we go. I found it. Okay. So now I've got, this is the end where we just ended, okay? And I'm going to lay this down and I'm going to kind of fold it under like that just to get it out of my way. Then I'm going to take the end that we started with. Again, this is in bind aid and this will really help you, okay? And we want this to overlap the size of your binding. So if you have 2.5 inch binding, it would be overlapping 2.5 inches. If you have 2 1/4 like I do, it's going to be 2 1/4. So I'm going to, whoop, this isn't my good one, but oh gosh, I don't know if I can see 2 1/4 or not on this one. May have to find my other one. A second here. Give me a second. I've got several. Here we go. This one will be easier. The other one, the numbers are awfully small. Okay, so here's my 2 1/4. So I'm going to take that measurement on my hem gauge and I'm going to put it along the, here's the raw edge right here. I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to put the pin in the back piece. that we're going to cut off. And I'm going to make sure I get it lined up here. Like that. Okay. And we'll measure one more time just to make sure everything measures out nicely. So here's the two. It's a little long, so I'm actually going to move the pin up just a teeny little bit. It's just a little bit long. So let's measure one more time. It's always good to be accurate, so take your time doing that. Oh, that looks better. Okay, so there's my 2 1/4. Then I'm going to take this end. This is the end where we ended, and we're going to fold this back, and I'm just going to cut this off. Like I said, this was all in lots of pictures in bind aid. I just loved that bind aid, and it really helped me learn to do binding, because I struggled. I couldn't figure out how to do this part, and it was so simple when I saw the picture of it. You know, it made total sense to me. Okay, so there is my 2 ends. So then, to do the flip, this is always the hard part, right? So to do the flip, what you're going to do is you're going to lay the one on the left here, this is where we started, at a 45-degree angle down like this. Now we're going to take this one, this is where we just finished our binding. We're going to open it up. This is the wrong side, and I'm going to lay the wrong side down on the quilt, like that. Okay? Then I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to open it up as I go. I'm going to get it, whoops, see if I can get a hold of it. There we go. And then I'm going to continue in the same direction. As I laid it down here, I'm going to continue in the same direction. I'm going to open it up. And then when you put these together, your fold lines that you folded in when you folded your binding over are going to be perpendicular to each other. One's going to be going up and down, and one's going to be going sideways. And you're going to line up your corners. Oops, sorry, I'm sticking my arm in the camera. My pins are all over there. Okay, and then we're going to put this side. Sounds like my neighbor's mowing his lawn. He always mows when I do videos. He must wait for me to start the video camera. And he's like within inches of my window over here. All right. Then I'm going to take my marking pen, and I want to be able to know where the corner is here on this side and here on this side. Now you can mark this all the way across if it's easier for you, but I usually just kind of eyeball it. But I do like to mark it. Okay, so then we're going to take our little quilt and we're going to fold it down and get these all lined up and nice and flat. You got to make sure you get this little thing flat here. I'm going to put my needle back in the center. So I'm on Q02 for the 1/4 inch. If you use Q01, it's the center needle position. So I'm just going to put my foot down, and I'm going to drop my needle right where my mark was, and I'm going to aim for this mark over here. Get everything nice and flat, and just aim for my mark. Just like that. Okay. Now if you're nervous, you can always check to make sure that you have done the little flip correctly before you cut anything. So we'll take the pins out here. Let's take the pins. I've done this a lot of times now, so I'm getting much better at it. Okay, so then you can tell that it's going to lay flat. We just got that bulk to cut out of there, so we'll cut this out with our scissors. I usually just use my scissors. I don't take the rotary cutter on this one. And do that, and then I'm going to just open this up with my fingers here. Finger press it. So it's going to be nice and flat when I go to stitch this down. And that is that little flip. And it's just, like I said, the pictures in bind aid are very good. And I just went through, and I used to have to get that out every time I did binding. So, I did for a long, long time. Just got it out when I was ready to do binding. So I'm going to pin these down to finish this little piece. And, but I got it out so I could see the pictures each time that I was doing everything correctly and putting putting my pieces of binding together correctly and doing the seams right. So, and then that flip was the thing that got me. So, hoping that I didn't bleed on my quilt, I stabbed myself. So, All right, so then we're going to go back to Q02, move my needle back over to the 1/4 inch seam, and then we're going to finish this little seam. So this will be the end of it. These turn out so cool. This all running the edge of my fabric right along my J foot. And then we'll tie off over here. All right, we did it. Okay. So there is our binding. Let's take these pins out here. Now, so the goal with binding in the machine, okay, so we've got the binding on the back of the little quilt. I'm going to take this over to my ironing board now, and I'm going to press this binding out very crisply. When you do binding by hand on the front and flip it over, you don't normally do this pressing part, but you do have to press it when you're doing it with the machine. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get your binding to look nice on the edge, on the back. Okay, so I'm going to take this out and I'm going to press very crisply all the way around my binding, and then we'll come back and we're going to stitch it down on the front. Okay, so we're ready to put our beautiful corners in, and we have to do that on the front first before we do the stitching. And so what I have done is I've done the crisp press on the back of my binding here, okay? And then I turned it over, and what I'm going to do is take a couple of the clover clips, and I'm going to clip the binding over on each side of the corner. I'm just going to right down to where the stitching line is, where I stitched the binding on. Okay, so we're going to just bring the binding right down to there. Okay, and then, oops, I got this one a little off yet. Okay, then I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to push up on the right hand side of the binding. Got to get my pin ready here because I got to put a pin in the corner. I'm going to put my finger along, and I'm going to make sure that binding stays right along my sewing, my seam, and I'm going to make a nice 45-degree angle right up in the corner here, and I'm going to bring it down to the other side where that seam is that we made. It's always a little tricky to get your fingers in there, and I'm going to make a beautiful 45-degree corner right there, and I'm going to take the pin and I'm just going to pin it right together like that. Okay, and I'm going to do that all the way around. So I've already done the other ones. I pushed my thumb up on the right, brought the left down, and pinned it in the corner. So even when I do big quilts, I only use 8 clips. I have 1 clip on each side of the corner just to hold things together for me when I'm getting ready to do the corners. Okay, so now we've got these all ready to go. I do need to change my thread. I think I'm going to go back to my monofilament. I couldn't find any yellow that was the same color as this. So I think I like to use very matchy thread or monofilament depending on what I'm doing. I didn't find a yellow that matched enough, and then there's also some white in here. We're going to do a zigzag stitch to put the binding down, and I don't like the stitch to really show very much, so I normally use monofilament or a very matching thread. So I'm going to do my monofilament. Give me a minute. I'm going to have to find it again. I think I set it back in the drawer, and then I'll be right back and we'll start putting our binding on. Okay, so we're ready to zigzag the binding on, and if you like a straight stitch, that's fine. I found that this zigzag works better for me because I find that I don't miss so easy as I do with a straight stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my number 1 tab to a standard zigzag, and I use 1-10, and I like a special real narrow setting, so I put it at 2 millimeters wide and 1.4 millimeters long. Okay, so that's what I have for my settings. I'm using, and it's 1-10, so just a zigzag. And then what I do then is I put the binding right up to the line that we stitched the binding on with, you know, the seam line, and I'm going to use that notch. I like to use my regular J-foot because that notch goes right down the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tie off and I've got my monofilament in here. Give me a second, I need to put my glasses back on. And I'm going to bring the edge of that binding right up to that seam line. The right hand zig of the zigzag is going to be on the binding and the left hand zag is going to be off. And it's very narrow, so you're just going to go right, the right side is on the binding and the left side is off the binding. So what I do is when I get close to these second hand, I'm getting caught on I always sew with my embroidery unit on. So it's getting caught on my embroidery unit. So I'm just going to hold this down right on that line. And I've got just a little bit of a spot there that I need to tuck in. There we go. The right hand zig is on the binding and the left hand zag is off. Now I am going to leave this pin in the corner because if I take it out, my beautiful corner will be gone. So I'm going to leave that in and I'm going to very slowly and carefully sew into the corner. I only use very, very thin pins. These are magic pins. They're extra fine patchwork pins and they're very, very thin and very, very soft. So I'm going to take I'm going to go around the corner now. So when I look here, I overshot my corner by a little bit because my notch is not on the edge of my fabric. So I'm going to raise my needle. Just going to adjust over just a little bit and then drop my needle again. So if you overshoot, you're fine. You can just adjust a little bit. Okay, so then we're going to go out of this corner. There we go. The right hand zig is on the binding. The left hand zag is off the binding. Okay, and I've got my binding brought right up to the stitching line that I stitched it on with. Just hold it down with your fingers. So I really don't, even when I do big quilts, I don't use pins, I don't use clips except in the corners. And I just hold it down. I've even done lots of big, you know, like queen size quilts this way, and it just works really slick. With matching thread in the needle and bobbin or monofilament. So it depends. Like if it's a bed quilt, I try to get matching thread because I feel that the monofilament's a little bit rough. So I like to try to do like quilts with regular thread if I can. So I usually try to find a matchy thread if I can. This I don't mind so much because it's just make sure my thread's going okay here. Monofilament's a little tricky sometimes. This is the best monofilament I've ever found. This is the Mettler Transfo, and it does work pretty well through the machines, even in the bobbin, because I have it in the bobbin as well. But it can be just a little tricky. All right, so it looks like I might, well, not too bad. I didn't overshoot it too bad, so I think I'll be okay. Get everything lined up with my line and come out of this other corner. There we go. Okay, and it looks like I've got a little thread here, so we'll get that as we're going around here. Get everything lined up with the line. Just remember, right hand zig is on the binding, the left hand zag is off the binding. I started doing this type of binding just on like, you know, like wall hangings and stuff like that because I do so many samples. But I've found that I like it just as well on the bed quilts because, you know, I use my bed quilts. So like when I make quilts, I use them on the bed. And I think it's just a little stronger. I think it holds up better than hand-stitched binding. If you're going to use your quilts, that's why I make them. I like to use them. So, but if you like to hand-stitch, by all means, hand-stitch these on. They look beautiful that way too. Okay, so I'm going to get everything lined up here. Get into another corner. See if I can get this lined up here. All right, we're going to zigzag into the corner. Let's see how I do on this one. I try to get it about right, but I don't always. All right, I think maybe, well, I kind of overshot this one. So I'm going to put the foot down, raise my needle, and then I'm just going to push over to the left and lower my needle again. And it won't show. It might show just a teeny bit on the back to do that, but that's a good way to get everything lined back up where you want it. All right, so I got to get my binding all lined up here, and off we go to the next side. Hopefully I won't run out of bobbin thread. We'll see. My bobbin sensor hasn't been working too well, so let's see. I think it's okay yet. Sometimes my bobbin sensor gets has fluff around it and I have to clean it out. I think it's working today. Let's see how it's doing. I think we're still doing. Hopefully we'll make it all the way around. All right, getting close here. Getting about ready to do the last corner. This is a nice small little quilt, so you can actually see me do the whole binding. Sometimes I cut and just do the last side, but we're almost around already. So here's the last clip. I'm going to take one of the last clips out. Get this all lined up. Sometimes it helps to kind of spread your fingers apart so you're holding the binding down. Going to work and go into this last corner here. Let's see how we're doing. Looks like I still got thread, so we're doing well. All right, so I'm going to kind of pull back a little bit on that corner to keep it nice and flat and straight. And work into the corner. You can do this with a, if you like to work with a walking foot, that works fine too. Okay, so I kind of overshot this one too, so I'm going to put my foot down, raise my needle, and then I'm going to scoot over so that my notch is right on the edge of my binding. That center notch. Okay, so let's get this one. We're just about done. Gonna make sure I get this straight here. Okay. And out of this corner. We're just about there. Now I've got this little spot right here where I started, and I don't like to zigzag over the other stitching too far, so I always like to mark it. Because you can kind of see the zigzag then if you kind of go over it, so I like to mark it so I don't take more than maybe a stitch over with the pin. Just about there, so let me make sure this is good and straight here. All right, almost done. Right up to the last little bit and take about a stitch over that pin, and then I'm going to tie off. And we're all the way around. Look at there. Then we can take out the pins in the corner. There we go. There is my little mini quilt. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. I'll get it all hung up in the little hanger for you so you can see it. Take my pins out of my corners. All right, so now the next step I have to do is I will take the paper off of my Heat and Bond Ultra here, and I will press this down to the back of my little mini quilt. Now the one thing I did find when I started doing this is that this part doesn't iron down well, this like thicker part where the hem is. So I just put the Heat and Bond in the middle, and then I take a needle and thread and just take a stitch right here and right here just to hold those ends down. So I'll just take a little bit and put a stitch right there so that it holds it down. And then I'll put it up in the frame so you can see the end result. But there is our little mini quilt with the binding. So I will be back in a minute with it in the frame so you can see. Oh, and we'll have to put the little, let's do that right now. We need to put our little candies on, because the little candies and the little, I think this is supposed to be the little lollipops. So let's see. These go on the one with the black bottom, the little black polka dot. So this one here is going to go on here. It's like a little lollipop. So it's going to go on up there. So I'm just going to take some hot glue and glue that on. I think I plugged it in here. Yep. So I'm going to glue this on. I'm just going to put a little bit in the middle. And then put it on the, there's a little stick right here. So I'm just going to kind of put it on the little stick right there. So that goes on there. Okay, and then the other one, where is it? Here it is. The other one goes down on this one. So it goes on the top of this one right here. So we'll just put a little bit of glue in the center where it won't really show. And then we'll put that right there. So now I'm ready to put the backing, the sleeve on too. So there we go. There's our little embellishments. We've got that on here, and then this one went on the little stick up here. All right, so there's our little embellishments also. So I'll be right back once I get this in the frame for you to see for the final viewing. Okay, so I finished up the back. I just took and pressed down the Heat and Bond Ultra on the little sleeve, and I took a couple little stitches, one on each side to hold it on. And I've got it on my little frame now. Isn't that cute? So there's the October Kimberbell Mini Quilt. How cute is that? I'm going to be anxious to put that up. And you know, I kind of like the pink. I think the pink turned out cute. It would have been cute in lavender as well. So mine is just going to be pink. So thanks so much for joining me, everybody, for the October Kimberbell Mini Quilt. We'll do the November one in the first week of October. And I haven't looked at that one yet. I'm not sure what that one looks like. Let's see what it looks like. I'm not sure what they did. Did they do like Thanksgiving? I'm not sure what they did. Let's take a look at it. Oh yeah, it's sort of like harvest, give thanks. So this is the one that we'll do. Looks like it has 4 blocks, I think. So this one we'll do in October. So thank you so much for joining me, everyone. And if you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, Sew Along with Jan. And then come join us on the Facebook group Sew Along with Jan as well. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next month for the November Kimberbell Mini Quilt. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.